A Day That Would Never Come, a short story in the Endless Untold Universe by Sean Johnson. The room was dimly lit, the fluorescent light overhead flickering intermittently, casting erratic shadows across the stained walls. The hum of outdated medical machinery filled the small space, its drone a constant reminder of the poor condition everything that had survived the war was in. The recycled air smelled stale and mixed with the sharp, biting scent of antiseptic that clung to everything in the clinic. Kerry sat on the edge of the metal examination table, his feet hovering just above the cold, cracked tiles. His gaze drifted to the cracked mirror across from him, where his reflection stared back. The right side of his face he recognized was still his, but the left side bore the faintest traces of recent trauma, freshly healed skin, tinged with the pallor of something that had very nearly almost been lost. His eyes, though, carried the weight of it all, ashen with a mix of anger and something unspoken, a silent, simmering shame. He glanced down at the stump where his left arm had once been, now ending in a smooth, metallic joint. The sight of it made him clench his teeth. Ashamed, annoyed, both. It was hard to pin down what gnawed at him more, the loss of flesh, or the fact that he was still here, a cruel and ironic joke of surviving the war, only to be brought low by something so insignificant. Just then the door creaked open, and an older man stepped inside. Dr. Levitz was a grizzled physician with a face carved by years of stress and exhaustion. His hair was more gray than brown these days, and deep lines ran across his forehead, accentuating the permanent furrow in his brow. He glanced at Kerry, then at the tablet in his hand, his expression a blend of professional detachment and weariness. "Do you still not remember anything?" Dr. Levitz asked, not bothering to look up from the tablet in his hands. Kerry frowned, the doctor's words not quite penetrating the haze in his mind. "No. One minute I'm walking through the city, and the next, I'm waking up here a few days later." Dr. Levitz sighed, setting the tablet aside. "It's not uncommon after trauma like that. The mind has a way of protecting itself, blotting out the worst parts. The electric shock from that mind caused extensive damage to your body, and doubtless your short-term memory. The blast that tore through the nerves in your left arm caused impressive damage to your frontal lobe, even penetrating to the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for memory. As for the left eye, severe damage to the optic nerve. I'm not sure if they told you, but we had to replace the left eye along with your arm. But you already had guessed that." Kerry stared at the doctor, the words settling in. "My eye, too." Dr. Levitz nodded, his expression softening just a bit. "Yes, but the integration was successful. You yourself couldn't even tell a difference after 3 days, no? Your vision in that eye should be normal, though it may take some time to fully adjust." Kerry tried to process it all, but the sheer absurdity of it made him almost laugh. "Doc, I survived the entire siege without a single bloody scratch, and now, months later, walking the same street I walk down every day, I step on a damn proximity mine." He sneered. The thought was so bitterly ironic it was almost funny. Almost. "Courtesy of the Federation, no doubt. A coward's weapon left behind to kill the unwary. But you're lucky. You walked away relatively unharmed compared to the pieces of people they usually drag in here after stepping on one of those buggers," Dr. Levitz said, while assessing Kerry's vision and reflexes. Dr. Levitz, not noticing the dark amusement flickering in Kerry's eyes, continued, "You really are a lucky one. If they'd gotten you here even a few minutes later, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. Quick pressure." "What?" Kerry asked the doctor, before he felt the sharp jerk of new metal being fixed to his arm. Pressure wouldn't have been the way Kerry would describe the sensation. The nerve endings left in his stump shot pain up and down his shoulder, and he grimaced. A quick pop, a whir, and the worst was over. "Have a look. Let me know if it's responding to you," said the doctor. Kerry flexed his new hand, watching as the metallic fingers curled and uncurled with precise mechanical movements. "And the cost?" he asked, dreading the answer he already knew. Dr. Leavitt gave a slight shrug, his eyes flicking away for a moment. "It's not cheap, but the economy is what it is. Everyone's in debt, Kerry. You're no different. I would think less about zeros and more about how you're lucky to be alive." Kerry clenched his jaw, his frustration mixing with the bitter acceptance of his situation. "Lucky," he said under his breath as he studied the grey metal of his new palm. "Just another debt, another lump on the pile." He slid off the table, the cold tiles biting into his bare feet. As he moved toward the door, the sounds of the clinic grew louder. Tired adults murmuring, children crying, the faint clatter of instruments as overworked nurses moved from one patient to the next. It was a cacophony of suffering that had once moved him, but now it felt distant, almost unreal. He stepped out into the corridor, where the chaos of the clinic was in full swing. The walls vibrated with the noise of lives unraveling, and for a moment Kerry felt nothing, no empathy, no pity, just a cold, detached observation. His new arm hung at his side, the metal cold against his skin, a constant reminder of what he had lost. He pulled the sleeves of his jacket down to cover it as well as he could and walked out to the muddy street that would lead him home to subsection 2. Kerry stepped out into the fading light of subsection 2, where the sky blazed with hues of deep orange and purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. The streets, slick with mud from a recent downpour, stretched out before him, now eerily empty. The once bustling roads had fallen silent, their vibrant neon signs extinguished by the ongoing power shortages. The darkness seemed to deepen the sense of isolation, amplifying the loneliness of a city that had become a ghost of its former self. The only sounds were the distant echoes of dripping water and the occasional hiss of a malfunctioning street lamp. People had retreated indoors, wary of the nightfall that brought its own dangers. The dark was when bad things happened, when the Coalition of Order and Security, COS, patrolled with ruthless efficiency and the city's abandoned corners became havens for trouble. Kerry walked with purpose, not wanting to become one of those that was caught outside at night and was never heard from again. As he navigated the side streets, he caught sight of a squad of COS officers. They moved in their dark uniforms with an air of intimidating control, their presence a reminder of the Federation's grip on the sector. Kerry slipped into the shadows and avoided them by taking a less traveled path, a side street that offered some semblance of safety from their watchful eyes. The side street was even more desolate than the main roads, with buildings leaning in as though sharing whispered secrets. The air was thick with the smell of wet streets and the acrid tang of industrial waste polluting the air. He walked slowly, the mud squelching beneath his boots, until he reached the old warehouse district. Here the buildings loomed like spectres of a bygone era, their metal exteriors corroded and streaked with rust. Kerry approached the first warehouse, its massive doors hanging crookedly on broken hinges. The building, once a munitions factory, had been abandoned at the end of the war, its interior now a refuge for rats and the occasional squatter. The structure felt haunted, a relic of a time when it had been alive with the sounds of machinery and the smell of photonic fumes. Kerry had worked here once, as little more than a slave under his master's heel. Every adult was conscripted to contribute to the Federation's war efforts in one way or another those days. Inside, the warehouse was a cavernous shadow, the dim light filtering through broken windows, casting ghostly patterns on the floor. Crates and twisted machinery lay scattered among the debris, and the silence was punctuated only by the distant roar of approaching thunder. Kerry's steps echoed softly, not wanting to be caught off guard by anything unknown in this place. As he ventured deeper into the warehouse, something called to him. A sense of inexplicable pull guided him toward the far end of the building. He couldn't hear anything, but it was a felt presence, an invisible rope pulling at his core. As he continued towards the end of the building, past broken machinery and waste, the sensation only grew stronger. A faint whirring was emanating inside of his head, light glowing embers beginning to spark with excitement. There, half buried under a pile of rubble, he spotted it. A bot. He could tell by the flat top of its head it was an original FA-400, one of the first military robots to arrive on Terra before the outbreak of war. Clunky and slow, but notably durable, it was a relic from a bygone era, now reduced to a shell of its former self. The bot's head was still intact, except for an eye missing in its black socket. Its single orange eye started flickering weakly. Kerry crouched beside it, his breath catching in his throat. How this bot stayed intact after all these years, let alone of any sort of power reserves left in its cells, Kerry didn't know. As he reached out to touch the bot's head, he felt a faint, almost imperceptible hum. A sensation that seemed to extend an unspoken connection. It was as if the bot was trying to communicate with him, sending a message through the void. Kerry hesitated, his mind wrestling with the possibility that this communication might be real, or merely a figment of his imagination. The whirring in his head only became stronger, and he could feel a faint buzzing current beneath his skull. The bot's eye flickered in an irregular pattern, and Kerry found himself caught between the tangible and the intangible, questioning the boundaries of his own sanity. Just then, the orange flickering eyes became a steady glow, piercing the darkness, and the metal figure before him slowly started to emerge from the rubble, its bulky frame pushing against the weight of the wreckage. Kerry took a step back, his heart pounding in his chest. The bot's movements were slow and deliberate, its joints creaking with the strain of years of disuse. As it freed itself from the rubble, it stood to its full height, towering over Kerry with an imposing presence. The orange glow of its eyes intensified, casting an eerie light over the dusty surroundings. A low, mechanical voice crackled to life from the bot's speakers, distorted and garbled with age. "Identify yourself," it demanded, the words carrying a tone of authority that was unsettling in its clarity. The bot's head swiveled slowly, its sensors scanning Kerry from head to toe. Kerry felt a chill run down his spine. He had no idea how to respond. The bot's command had been clear, yet the situation was anything but. His new augmentations, the robotic arm and the cybernetic eye, could they confuse this old machine? He hesitated, then spoke, his voice uncertain. "Brackman, Kerry, Sector 2. He spoke as a reflex after the years of federal occupation. The bot's sensors whirred softly as if processing the information. Its head tilted slightly to the side like a confused dog, the orange light in its eyes pulsing rhythmically before returning to a solid orange. "Error. Identification not recognized," it droned, its tone flat and devoid of emotion. "Mechanical augmentations detected. Provide your clearance code and serial number." The bot's question hung in the air, and for a moment, Kerry felt an unexpected surge of fear. The bot, designed to identify and categorize, could not be able to classify him. This ancient soldier couldn't reconcile the difference between human and bot. The orange glow of its eyes flickered again, the confusion evident even in its rigid programming. Kerry's mind raced. How could this relic, this clunky machine, challenge his own sense of identity? The tension between them grew palpable, the space around them charged with uncertainty. The bot took a step closer, its heavy footfalls echoing through the hollow warehouse. "Identify yourself," it repeated, the demand laced with an edge of urgency, as if it was stuck in a loop, trying desperately to make sense of what stood before it. Kerry swallowed hard, a mix of frustration and unease churning within him. "I'm human," he insisted, though his voice lacked the conviction he hoped to project. I'm still human." The bot's sensors whirred again, the orange light of its eyes dimming slightly as it struggled to process his words. "Error. Identification not recognized," it stated, almost as if it was talking to itself. The mechanical monotone gave way to a brief, sputtering silence, as if the machine's circuits were failing to comprehend the paradox that Kerry represented. The tension between them felt like a taut wire, ready to snap at any moment. Kerry clenched his fists, his new robotic arm responding with a smooth precision that felt alien to him. At that moment, in his own mind, as if it was audibly spoken, Kerry heard in a gentle voice, "You are one of us." The bot was just a relic, a piece of outdated technology that had outlived its purpose. The bot's flickering eyes brightened, its rigid frame trembling slightly. "I've been waiting so long. Are you one of us?" Kerry's jaw tightened. The bot's plea struck a chord deep within him, an echo of the humanity he once held. But that humanity was fading. "No," he whispered, his voice barely audible in the darkness. The bot's glowing eyes dimmed, its posture slumping as if the very life had been drained from it. "But you're one of us," it murmured, the words laced with a childlike hope that was quickly fading. "You can save me?" Kerry turned away, unable to face the bot any longer. As he walked toward the exit, the bot's voice followed him, growing weaker with each word. "Please, don't leave me. Please." The sound of the bot's pleas cut through Kerry like a knife, but he kept walking. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He knew he could have done something, anything to help the bot, but he chose not to. In that moment, he realized something chilling. He preferred the cold, emotionless clarity that came with his mechanical parts. The warmth of human empathy had become a burden he no longer wished to carry. As he stepped out into the night, the streets were eerily silent. The power was still out, leaving the city in darkness. People hid in their homes, fearful of what lurked in the shadows. Kerry paused, looking back at the warehouse one last time. The bot's voice had finally gone silent, and the buzzing in his head had passed. Kerry felt nothing. The decision had been made, and he was content with it. Or at least, that's what he told himself. They were all of them wanting to be saved, waiting for a day that would never come. Thank you for listening to A Day That Would Never Come, a short story in the Endless Untold Universe by Sean Johnson.